All right, welcome back to the super-centex podcast. It's the last week of the year, and we have Chad Conine, DJ Ramirez alongside me. Guys, how are y'all doing?
Good,
We're good. Yeah.
Good. It's a short week, so you got to get everything done fast because come Wednesday we'll be at Jerry World. So
That's right, absolutely. Which, kind of leads me into my first question. We blinked, and here it is. We've reached state week. We have two teams who haven't lost a single game all year playing for state championships this week in Mart and Oglesby, two Central Texas teams. Yet both are underdogs in their matchups. Let's start with Mart first, even though that'll be the second game that we cover. So the Panthers will face number one ranked Albany in Thursday's Class 2A Division II state championship game. This, of course, is the same Albany team, not the same Albany team, but the same program they faced last year.
same two schools in the final.
Yeah, same two schools. They beat, and remember that one was viewed as a monumental upset, but it was 41-21 Albany. So what do you think? Could payback? Could that be the factor that pushes Mart over the hump this time?
I don't think it will be. I think the intangibles matter less in this game. People talk. I think sports fans think a lot about intangibles because they're like, well, if we got this intangible and we got that intangible, and that means we're going to win. You talk yourself into it if your team has a chance to win going in, right? But I feel like for Mart, it's simple. You have to stop Adam Hill. I mean, you gotta contain him. You gotta contain him and maybe make them beat you passing the ball. And if you can't do that, it's going to be a long day. I mean, stopping the run is such a hard thing to do for a football team, and some of the best teams around don't do it. The Kansas City Chiefs haven't stopped a running back for less than 4 yards this whole season, I don't think. But it's important. You got to be able to do it.
Spoken like a guy who's watched a lot of Chiefs games. DJ, I mean, do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be the biggest thing on their minds. I actually went out to Mart this morning and was talking to Coach Hoffman about it. And for sure, their biggest priority is slowing them down. Like because I asked him, what they expected and what I guess they would have to do in order to beat them. And it really was like, they're going to try to slow them down. Like that's the biggest thing that they're working on. And, Mart's at this point in the season, they're more than a little banged up. I'm pretty sure those kids have been sitting in ice buckets the entire weekend. And I they got to get their guys, their running game going and they got to get their, the things that they do well, they have to keep doing well while also trying to stop Albany. And not just Adam Hill. Like Adam, obviously he's the priority because he's the big guy. He's the Texas Tech commit, as Chad has pointed out every day this week.
2,500 rushing yards.
Yeah, which is a big thing for a 2A school, you going to a D1 program. But they have other guys.
I was just looking at his rivals. He has an offer from La Tech, and then he'll be a preferred walk-on at Texas Tech. So, he's a 2A kid with a legit D1 offer, and then gonna choose to be a PWO at Texas Tech.
Okay, interesting.
Now you mentioned slow them down, and I get that, and with slowing down, I think you have to be able to get off the field in a reasonable amount of time because. To me, and I've watched a lot of Mart games, the most demoralizing thing for Mart, I mean, for anybody, but this happens to Mart sometimes, is that the other team runs for 6 yards, and they run for 8 yards, and they run for 4 yards, and they run for 7 yards, and they just go all the way down the field, and Mart doesn't get a chance to do what Mart likes to do, which is lightning quick chunk plays and score in a hurry. The other team just holds the ball the whole time, and the 11 guys that are out there the whole time for Mart start to get worn down a little bit. And, they got to slow them down, but they also got to get off the field. They got to maybe slow them down on their side of the 50 some of the time.
Yeah, and the guys that DJ mentioned that are banged up in the ice bath, pretty key guys, aren't they? We're talking about DeMontrell. Wasn't he banged up last week?
DeMontrell, JD Bell, several of their linemen. It's I think it's definitely going to be one of those like gritty games where, the team that has it last is going to win if Mart does what they're hoping to do. Because if they let Albany, take off, then it's going to be another 20-point loss like it was last year. But I think they're extra motivated. Like you mentioned, you can't rely on intangibles, but they are extra motivated being that they lost to this team last year, right? And this group of seniors has not won a state championship. This is the third time that they've been there. They lost the semifinal, I think 2 years ago. And, they have, when they were in middle school, 7th, 8th grade, they were watching Mart win state championships, and this is their last try and they haven't been able to win one. So they're going to be motivated. They're going to be gritty. And really it just is trying to stop Albany from, taking off and holding onto the ball, and, try not to let their injuries and their, wear them down. Because Hoffman was pretty adamant that they're not going to let that be an excuse.
So, there's an old expression. Sometimes it's more about the Jimmies and Joes than it is about the X's and O's. But you know what I would say to that? Sometimes it's a little about both. It's about who you are and what you got inside you and all that. But it's also about execution and making the plays and getting the stops and getting off the field, like Chad said. But let's face it, if Mart does win, what are they going to say in that post-game press conference? They're going to say, nobody believed in us. We're the underdog. I mean, and sometimes that's what you need, is that feeling of us against the world.
Go ahead.
I
thought of something interesting just now. 3 years ago, we're doing stories on Mart and Rodwell Freeman and those guys that were trying to win their fourth in the row, win one every year. Now we're talking about seniors that haven't won one yet, that are wanting to get one, So I'm not saying, that's that big motivating factor, but that's definitely on those kids' minds. And they've won a lot of games, but I know Armando Chavez doesn't want those 352 extra points to go for naught,
Absolutely. So both teams have not played a lot of close games this year. Albany, week 1, had a 22-21 win over Trinity Christian from Lubbock. And then in the third round of the playoffs, it had a 19-14 win over Munster. Meanwhile, Mart's closest regular season game was 36-21 over Centerville. Weren't you at that one, Chad?
I did cover that one, yep.
And then in the last 2 playoff games, the Panthers have had to rally in the second half after trailing at halftime. One of those games was a 57-20 game against Lovelady, so that second half really went Mart's way. And then obviously the 38-24 win over Chilton. So all that to say, if this does turn into a close game, and DJ was just saying she thinks it might be, does that favor one team over the other, since they really haven't had a lot of experience in that? What do you think?
Well, I think Mart kind of makes runs like a basketball team, Like you look up and like the other night we looked up and they'd made a 17-0 run, they'd scored 17 straight points and kind of turned that game around.
Didn't they end up scoring 24 unanswered?
Yeah, I believe so, because they were down 24-14 and they won 38-24. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So if Albany is in the situation where Mart can get that momentum turned and get on one of those runs, then Albany's in trouble. Yeah. So yeah, a close game, I think, in that sense benefits Mart.
DJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have seen it in the past 2 weeks is that Mart is got this sort of drive of, um, you especially being down both of those games, just you blink and all of a sudden they're marching down the field and you can't stop them, right? So, like I said, it's going to be a close game, and if and like Chad mentioned, if Mart gets going, and especially in the second half, then Albany's going to be the one on the ropes having to try to stop them, and I think that's what the Panthers want.
You know why I think it could benefit Mart in a close game is because of a guy that Chad mentioned just a minute ago, Armando Chavez. Talk about an X factor in a close game. If it does come down to a kick at the end, I feel like you're pretty confident knowing that, you've got a kid out there that's done it for 4 years, that's really reliable, that can finish off a game like you want. Obviously, we saw that with China Spring, with Mr. Automatic for a couple years there, Thomas Barr. So if it does come down to the wire and it comes down to a play and Mart, gets a crease and gets into the Albany territory, and they're like, rather than run a play that might be low percentage and try to score a touchdown, let's see if we can kick a field goal to win the game here. I mean,
I'm looking at Albany
special
stats.
Go ahead.
Their kicker Z Wagoner has 3 for 3 on field goals with a long of 35, and he's made 68 of 82 extra point attempts this year.
So I would say Mart definitely has the advantage of kicker then.
That's probably pretty typical 2A kicking numbers for this time of year.
I would agree. Yeah.
If they decide to go for 2, I mean, Armando has also made a 2-point conversion pass this postseason. So
nice.
It's not like they don't have,
hopefully Kevin Hoffman's sitting there going, shut up, DJ. The Albany coaches might be listening.
I don't think they're going to try to go for 2 because there's just such a high probability that they will be able to get the ball back there at AT&T Stadium,
Yeah.
So they can feel confident they'll get the ball back, so they'll go ahead and kick.
Nice.
Throw back to an earlier story. So go back, watch old podcasts, and you'll get that.
Yes, exactly. I like it. I think we just talked about that last week. All right. Well, then we've got Oglesby playing tomorrow, Wednesday, as we film the podcast on Tuesday. So the Tigers are 13-0. They have scored at least 60 points in each of their past 6 games. And yet, and we've mentioned this on the podcast, if you go by sixmanfootball.com, they're actually a 41-point underdog to number 1 ranked Benjamin in the state championship game, 1A Division II. So I've got an existential question for you and you can sort of apply it to Oglesby. When you're doing something for the very first time, as Oglesby is in reaching state, how do you avoid that? We're just happy to be here feeling?
Go ahead, DJ.
Well, they got to be motivated to win, especially if nobody thinks that they're going to win. And be happy that you're there. It's your first time as a program there. But remember that you're still there to play a game, and like we mentioned, I think last week or the week before when we were talking about Oglesby and how and we don't talk a lot of 6-man football. When we do, we usually talk about like Abbott or Jonesboro, those teams. But like that one week I picked Oglesby over May and y'all didn't. And, everybody was like, we won that game it's just like, you have to be there to get the job done that you want to get done. And I mean, we were kind of griping this weekend about how Coach Dixon wasn't letting us talk to players for stories and stuff, but maybe in a way that's a good thing, especially like if they've never done it before. You don't want to get them distracted and like you're there to play a game, not really. Sure, enjoy the attention, but remember that you have to play a football game and you're there to win and to prove people wrong.
Yeah, and I will say this about just to clarify a little bit on the players. I think that was their call, that they didn't want to talk. I don't think that was necessarily Jeb saying we don't want you to talk to them. I think they've kind of gone radio silent. The players have,
Well,
and I kind of a part of me is like, sort of like, I get it, they're like trying to like focus in on the task.
A lot of those 1A school kids also, I think they get nervous, like they're not really up to talking in public, not just like
but every team has one kid that can jabber a little bit, So anyway, Chad, what do you think?
Well, you asked that question in such an eloquent way, as an existential quandary or something to look at, and that of course is right up my alley, and it made me think, immediately of a book called The Alchemist, right?
Okay.
And The Alchemist is like this fable, this boy who's a shepherd and decides to pursue his dream and go look for his personal treasure. And one thing that they keep telling him, all these wise men that he encounters, they tell him about the principle of favorability, right? It's beginner's luck. When you're in search of your personal legend, something will happen along the way to help you right at the start, right? So you're talking about their first time, right? So will they have the principle of favorability, right, at the state championship game because it's their first time?
We're going deep. We're going deep,
right? Well, the thing about The Alchemist is he has to go through all these struggles, and all these things happen to him along the way. To me, it speaks to, like in sports, of a team that gets to the championship game and then loses, and then gets there again and loses. Then finally, after several years of trying, wins the championship. On the other hand, kind of heck with all that, ups and down and legend stuff. We get there, let's win it.
Right.
And honestly, like, six-man football, it's not like, the NFL where it gets analyzed to death and everybody knows like every little facet of what's going to happen. Okay, so they're a 40-point underdog. That doesn't mean anything. Just throw that out the window.
Right. No, I think those are all good points. And, I joked earlier about Mart, and if they win that game, that they'll say nobody believed in us or whatever. So I used to really read Bill Simmons a lot, when he still wrote about sports instead of podcasting all the time.
We say on the podcast.
Yeah, as we say on the podcast. We still do write about sport, though. You got to admit that. And one of the things he would talk about was that, like, that is the number one thing that, like, every team says is the nobody believed in us said. And I think if you can tap into that, it can be a motivating factor. It can be something that you rally around and like, look, man, this is just us. We got to make a play,
Well, as a crusty old sports writer, the thing that you hear more than any other, like, is that, nobody believed us and we overcame all odds. That's one thing. One thing that I kind of am really cynical about, which is like, because like people are like, oh, well, we just work so hard. We're the hardest working team out here, and we work. And I'm like, okay, well, everybody says that. So is everybody outworking everybody? And it's a lot easier to say when you're 8-0 that you worked really hard to get here. It's all what you did. Okay, congratulations. But at the same time, yeah, you got to work hard. Yeah, you got to put in the reps and everything to be good. And so it's like kind of this thing that I can't really like. I just struggle with it, like trying to figure out if I believe it or not, or if it's all BS, right?
Well,
and then the third thing is, and this is the funniest one to me, or the one you hear all the time. Oh, well, we just get along so well as a team this year. Last year's guys were so divisive, and this year we get along so much better.
Have heard that a few times. Yeah, you do sound pretty cynical and grizzled right now, but
well, I got the playoff beard going. I might as well have the grizzledness to go along with it.
The sort of tweak on nobody believed in us is, well, they said we couldn't do it, or they said this about us, and I always think, who are they? Who are all these people that are saying all these things? Do you have a list? Can I see the attribution? I mean, who are they? So
But
yeah.
haven't you figured out, Bryce, that we live in a world where nothing means anything anymore? So
Oh my gosh, this is the most philosophical of all our podcasts. Let's move on and talk about some other stuff, which I think this is going to be fun. So we are a little less than 2 months away from UIL realignment. It is looming just around the corner. And last week we received a little more clarity as the conference cutoffs, as they call them. The UIL will sometimes call them conferences, Conference 6A, Conference 5A. Everybody else in the state calls them Class 6A, Class 5A, but whatever. It's the numbers that determine what class you're in, okay? And that will be for the 24 through 26 school years. So after a 4-year run in Class 3A, Lorena will be moving back up to 4A. They just barely, made that 4A number. And of course, there'll be 4A Division 2 for football. And guess what? China Spring and La Vega are also dropping down to 4A Division 2. They came in under that number. I saw one projection already, and this completely makes sense. I would agree with this, that would have a football district of China Spring, La Vega, Robinson, Conley, Gatesville, Lorena, and Hillsboro. How much fun would that be?
That would be
it makes me
go ahead,
DJ.
District ever. that district alone would get me through next football season.
Chad can remember that district. We used to have that.
It makes me feel like it's the good old days of like 2006,
Yep, that was it'll be a different number for football in 4A Division 2, but that used to always be 17-3A. Remember when 6-man was not 1A.
Right. Then like the Chiltons of the world were 1A, and then Mart was 2A, and Mart's still 2A. It's really appealing to us. I'm not sure. There's a couple of schools in there that it's not such good news for. I wouldn't be too pumped to be Hillsboro for one. They've been kind of in a playoff making range in the district they've been in. Gatesville the same way. I don't know, but elsewhere, Robinson was making a move in that district that didn't have China Spring, Lorena, and La Vega in it, and now they move in, and it's like, well, thanks a lot, Is that why Lonnie Judd was kind of helping make the map and made this?
I saw that picture. Yeah. I saw that picture. He was doing the UIL's job for him. Man. I wonder. We'd have to look closer at that and see if Robinson is not in there with La Vega and just see if Lonnie's coming up with some alternate scenario.
Right. Well, the other thing that this makes me think about is, are they going to still have a 4A Division 1? I mean, who does that include anymore? Or are they going to pull down some of those 5A schools or something?
If you look at yes, there's a 4A Division 1. If you look at the UIL's numbers, I can kind of pull it up here. But let's see here. I mean, obviously they break it down so
there'll be an even number of schools in each one.
Well, a fairly even. Like, okay, so 4A Division 1 actually has more schools than 4A Division 2. I mean, it's 106 in 4A Division 1, 94 in 4A Division 2. So, I mean, there's still plenty of schools out there. The cutoff was 957 students, and obviously China Spring and La Vega came in under that. So, yeah, it would be a really fun district. And what I think it would be cool for is, agreed with Chad, that for schools like Hillsboro and maybe Robinson, it would be suddenly a little tougher to make the playoffs in football. But I do think that is a really good competitive district across all sports, because I do think that would be your district in basketball and baseball and track and all those other.
I mean, minus Lorena, that's kind of what it is now, isn't it? Well, Hillsboro's not in it.
Hillsboro's not. Hillsboro's been up north, but if you look at it, it does really make sense for Hillsboro for them to pull in Hillsboro. And like you said, it would be like old times, Chad. I mean, we used to cover that district all the time. And apparently DJ's crossing her fingers hoping that it's going to happen. So yeah, it'd be cool. It would be really cool. And just a couple other little realignment notes. Marlin and Hamilton were barely on the cusp. They were close to being 3A, but they came in just under, so they will remain 2A. So you always want to be a big fish in a small pond. Johnny Tusa always used to say that, rather than vice versa. And then this is also, I think this will be a good thing. It will be Waco High and University in the same division of football.
They'll both be 5AD2, is that right?
And so, I mean, that would seem highly likely that they would end up in the same district. So, yeah, I think
the McGregor Bulldogs are out there saying, all right, okay, we got one break. Now give us a couple more and we're competitive.
Yeah, get rid of Lorena. And let's just put it out there. I mean, it's not like this district that Lorena was leaving wasn't a lot of fun for us to cover. I mean, that was a fun district with Lorena, Cameron, Franklin, McGregor, Troy, all those schools. So that was a good district for us. But yeah, I think it would be pretty cool to have the band back together, as they say. Good stuff. All right. Chad and DJ both will be up at Jerry World along with Rod Adelot, taking the pictures, and they'll be getting video and talking to kids and all that fun stuff. I'm sure the Oglesby kids will finally probably talk to some people.
The end of the road, baby. You want me to sing the Boys to Men song?
No, please don't.
Okay.
See
y'all.
y'all.
We'd have to pay for it anyway, wouldn't we?
Peace out.
All right.